الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala with كتاب الطهارة from the book of Akhsar and Mukhtasarat by Imam Al-Ban rahimahullah. And we'll see what we can finish inshallah ta'ala today. And those who are registered and those who are present, there will be an exam inshallah ta'ala, but not tonight. We'll send it to the emails inshallah. And there are levels. You can sit and listen, and that's absolutely fine inshallah. If you want to take notes, to make sure, because the notes are in Arabic, so to make sure that it's every mas'ala, every matter is clear. And then the test will be in English inshallah. And the higher level is to memorize it even inshallah ta'ala, for those who want to memorize every single word of it inshallah. So we reached the subject of al-wudu. The wudu, after we talked about the water and the different types of water to use for purification, whether it's for raf' al-hadath, to be in state of wudu, or izalatul khabath, to remove the impurities, and what's permissible and what's not permissible. And then we talked about al-aniyah, or the utensils or the containers where people would use to have water in, and what's permissible and what's not permissible, and different rulings. And then the adab, or the manners or the etiquettes with regards to relieving oneself, going to the bathroom, and things to be observed, and all of that is related to Taharah, or purification, before making salah, or regardless whether a person is going to make salah or not, and what's makruh, what's disliked, and what's haram, and what's recommended. And then after that we talked about as-siwak and some of the sunan al-fitra and some of the adab, and this is the last thing that we talked about. And then he says, fasl, chapter, furud al-wudu'i sitta. Furud is the plural of fard, going word by word inshallah, so that you have your notes with you inshallah ta'ala. Furud al-wudu'i sitta, or it depends, it's wa sunanu, right? It's so in the book, furud al-wudu'i wa sunanu, the furud of the wudu and its sunan, and its recommended acts. Furud is the plural of fard. So this is what is fard, that means what's an obligation. And whether ulama, they call it furud or arkan, pillars. Both refer to the same meaning, which means you have to do it. To be in state of wudu, it does not get cancelled as a result of a person forgetting or did a mistake or anything like this. It has to be done. And that's why this is a mandatory knowledge. Even if a person missed it out of ignorance, he did not know. Once he knows, he has to repeat the wudu and repeat the salah. So he says, furudul wudu sitta. And the wudu is the particular act of that is based on the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, using what type of water? What water do we use for wudu? Of what we mentioned before, we have to use the language of what's mentioned in the book, al-tahur. Right, the water that is tahur, according to what we mentioned before, that it's pure in itself and it's permissible to use for purifying oneself. If a person gets water that he stole from someone and he makes wudu, would the wudu be valid? No, the wudu would not be valid, and of course it's sinful. With the different things, so that we, inshallah, will try to cover as much as we can. So he says, furudul wudu, the pillars or the obligations of al-wudu, wa sunanu, and the recommended acts. He says here, غسل الوجه, غسل الوجه, or it's mentioned six pillars of wudu. There are 6 pillars or 6 obligations for the wudu. غسل الوجه مع مضمضة واستنشاق. غسل الوجه is to wash الوجه. الوجه ما توجه به, meaning the face. So to wash the face, with madmada, and madmada is when you put the water in the mouth and you move it inside of your mouth then you spit it out. This is madmada. Wal-istinshaq is when you put the water inside of your nose, you take it up, and then you let it go down. But al-istinshaq is once when the istinshaq is mentioned alone, it refers to al-istinshaq or istinthar, that means to also bring it down. But they don't say the istinthar as a fard. There's istinshaq, that means you bring the water inside of your mouth, inside of your nose. And there's istinthar, which means you bring the water down from your nose. What is fard is to bring it inside of your nose. Because if it goes inside, it comes out. So that's why they don't mention the istinthar as a pillar, because it's an obvious thing that it will come out. So, but this is part of the fard. And again, we're not going to the differences of opinions in these matters, but here, according to the madhab and according to also the explanation, when you see the ayat of the Quran talks about washing the face. And we have the action of the Prophet ﷺ that he would make madmada wal istinshaq. He would madmada, that means you move the water inside of the mouth. Madmada has three things. If you do two out of three, you made madmada. As the ulama, they say, you get the water inside of your mouth. That's one. To move tahriq al-ma, to move the water inside of the mouth. And the third one, to spit it out. Right? So if you do 2 out of 3, you did the madmada, and everything is according to one's best ability, and the sunnah as it will come to make mubalagha, to make excessiveness of it in the movement, in the amount of water that you put in the mouth, but not in the numbers, unless a person is fasting. But we'll come to that inshallah ta'ala. So fard, this is a pillar. غسل الوجه مع مضمضة واستنشاق. Why the madmada and al-istinshaq, the mouth and the nose, is included in the pillar, even though the verse talks about only فَغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ, wash your face, because the action of the Prophet ﷺ make the tafsir or the explanation of what the verse means. So what is the face? Is the face, and also the mouth and the nose is included in the face. And the Prophet ﷺ would never miss the mouth and nose, therefore it's also to be done and not to be missed. And according to this, if a person doesn't make madmada and istinshaq, his wudu is not valid, because this is part of the pillar of the wudu. So غسل الوجه, and الوجه is as we always know from منبت الشعر عادة, where the hair normally grows. If a person is bald, doesn't, where normally the hair grows, to the lower part of the shin, and from one part of the ear to the second one, to the other one. But it's basically, we all know the face, what you face. What's not the entire head, only the face with the mouth and the nose. Inshallah, if there's any questions, we'll be at the end, inshallah. This is the first pillar. And then he says, وَغَسْلُ الْيَدَيْنِ. وَغَسْلُ الْيَدَيْنِ. Ghasl means washing. And what constitutes ghasl? What is ghasl? If I do this, is that ghasl? Or there's masih and there's ghasl. Masih is wiping. Al-ghasl is when the water runs on the organ. It doesn't have to run on every single part of the organ, but as long as it runs, and then you move your hand with a dalk, and the dalk is to rub, right? And the entire organ is covered with water, then this is what constitutes ghusl. So it doesn't have to be that you put it under the tap water and you keep on like making sure that everything is running. So you can take some in your hand. Once the water runs on the organ, that means you're making ghusl, or ghasl here al-yadayn. And with the hand, which a dalk is not a pillar, but if you put only small amount, how are you going to cover the entire organ? That means you have to make the rubbing. But this is, as far as the pillar is concerned, غسل اليدين. غسل اليدين, washing the hands. And of course, the al-yadayn is from the tip of the fingers all the way to the elbows are covered, and the elbows are included. والرجلين, and the 2 foot. And to wash them to the ka'bayn, to the ankles, which is these 2 bones that separates the shin from the foot. So this has to be covered, which basically constitutes the feet here has to be washed, not the heel, but to the ankles. So all of that has to be washed. والرجلين. ومسح جميع الرأس مع الأذنين. Also a pillar, fard of the wudu, is to wipe. Here masih. Masih is wipe, ghasl is washing. So masih, wipe, jami' al-ras, the entire, jami', all the ras, or the head. So the entire head has to be wiped. According to the madhab, this is fard, not part of it, but the entire head. And the head from where the face ends, where usually the hair grows, all the way to the back of the head, to right before the neck. Right? So this is what the head is, not the hair, because the hair can be long. It's where the head ends. So all of that is fard. What is more perfect as it will come is to go back and forth. But if a person goes one time like this, as long as he wipes the entire head, he did the fard. Again, someone would say the part of it, yes, this is the jumhur, yes, is upon this. Right? But again, here we're studying here that it's to do the entire head. مع الأذنين, with the أذنين, with the ears. So the ears is fard. To wipe the ears with the same wiping. So you don't have to, as fard wise, you don't have to bring a new water in your hand to wipe the ears. With the same hand that you wipe the head with, you can wipe the ears, the inside and the outside. I'm not talking about the most perfect way to do it, but as long as it's wiped. So for example, if the forefinger is inside, going through the grooves of the ear, and then with the thumb going into through the back of the ear. Right? Masih. This is the masih. So, and the masih is only one time, and all these furud is, of course, one time. As far as the minimum requirement, this is the fard. This is the obligation. This is number 4. He says, what tartib, a pillar of the wudu is the tartib. A tartib is the order. Things has to be done in that order that is mentioned, because this is how the ayah came in that particular order, and this is how the Prophet ﷺ did the wudu. And there are more into the verse that makes the tartib, or the order as mentioned, obligatory and a pillar, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the masih, but actually, I'm sorry, the order here is not the same order as the ayah. So a tartib here was meant by the tartib is that you, the face and the madmada and istinshaq first, and then the hands to the elbow, and then the masih of the head and the ears, and then the rijlain, or the foot. This is the tartib, as it's mentioned again in the ayah. So it's not according to this tartib, there's just listing the furud. So when you're listing something is different than when you're talking about the tartib. And that's why, as if the ulama rahimahullah, when they put that list versus the tartib is not exactly at the same list, is in itself ishara, or pointing out to why the tartib, or the order, is an obligation. Because the norm is when you're listing something, you would group things, the like together, and then so the what is washed to group it together, and what's wiped to group it together. This is what normally people would speak. Wash the head, wash the face and the hands and the legs, and wipe your head and your ears. But why the tartib is pillar? Because the ayah did not do this. And since the ayah did not mention what you wash first and what you wipe second, it mentioned the wiping in between. That means this is the significance of that is that the tartib, the order, is mandatory. And of course, we have the action of the Prophet ﷺ. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق وامسحوا برؤوسكم وأرجلكم إلى الكعبين. So this is the tartib, this is the order. So that's why it's a pillar, it's fard of the wudu. And the sixth pillar of al-wudu, or the fard, wa muwala. Muwala, when you make muwala, something is after another. So that means, or comes with the meaning of a tatabu'. Something follows, one is followed by the other. That means you don't separate when you're making wudu between one or the other. You don't make some of the wudu and then you go take a nap and come back and continue the wudu, build on what you did before. So it has to be all done in the same time when you're making the wudu. And what constitutes al-muwala? This is something to be known urfan, as long as it's seen that the person did not stop the wudu and left it. Like for example, if someone makes the wudu and someone comes and talks to you, if you talk to him, how long? Are you saying salam and you continue, or you stop the wudu and you talk and, oh yeah, this has happened and this and that, and then you find yourself, it's been some time, then you have to start the wudu over again. Or the ulama rahimahumullah, when they make it easy for the people, what breaks the muwala is they say إذا جف العضو, if the last organ that you washed dries out normally, not that you're standing next to a fan, but if it's in the normal weather, it takes how long for the organ to dry. This is what breaks the muwala. But there's no evidence of that. But the muwala is something that needs to be observed. So it is not by the minute or the second or something like this. It's you don't basically look like you finished or you stopped the wudu. So al-muwala. So these are the 6 pillars of wudu. And the ulama, the way that they do things in the books of fiqh, we're not talking about sifatul wudu, the how to make wudu. We're not talking about this. We're talking about the pillars of wudu. Does that mean a person just make the pillars and that's it? No. We make wudu in the most perfect way. But why do we need to know the pillars? Because if you miss any of this, forgetfully or whatever there is, then the wudu is not valid. Anything else, this can be still, the wudu is valid because it's not pillar. So these are the 6 pillars of the wudu. And then he says, وَالنِّيَّةُ شَرْطٌ لِكُلِّ طَهَارَةٍ شَرْعِيَّةٍ. وَالنِّيَّة, and the niyyah, the intentions, shart is a condition, not a pillar, not an obligation, but it's shart, condition. And the condition is also an obligation, but it's different than when something is pillar. We'll talk about that very briefly. وَالنِّيَّةُ شَرْطٌ. So the niyyah is a condition for every tahara, for every purification, shar'iyya, religious purification. So physical purification, you can clean yourself, you're taking a shower, you don't have to have intentions for that. But if it's something shar'iyya, something religious, you need to be in state of wudu, you're making ghusl, the niyyah is a condition. So 2 people taking a shower in the morning because they used to do it, but one with his niyyah, this is ghusl. To be able to make salah, that means it's ghusl. If not, then it becomes just something to cool off or whatever. So here he talks about the niyyah. And the niyyah here, not that it's sincerely for the sake of Allah. This is, of course, obvious for the actions to be accepted. But what is meant by here is that you're doing an act of, you're making wudu. This is the intention in the heart that you're not just washing yourself, you're making wudu or you're making ghusl. وَالنِّيَّةُ شَرْطٌ لِكُلِّ طَهَارَةٍ شَرْعِيَّةٍ, except as he would mention 3 things as an exception. And the niyyah, as you would see in some of the madhab, some of the opinions, they would call it fard or a pillar, versus here it says shart. What's the difference? As far as practicality, there's no difference. You have to have niyyah. So there's no differences in opinions in that. But what's the significance of that? If you say that the niyyah is rukn, which is not as mentioned here, and we don't want to kind of distract ourselves, but just to get this quickly, if it says that it's a pillar, that means you do it and you go to the next pillar. This is how pillars are. Pillars is that you wash the face and you're done with the face. Then you go to the hands and you're done with the hands, one after the other like this. The same thing with the pillars of the salah. A shart is different. The condition, you have to have that condition from the beginning to the end. So for example, why the niyyah is shart? Because once you start making the wudu, you have to have that condition, you have to have the niyyah till you finish the wudu. What would happen if someone, say for example, someone is making wudu, and then after he washed his face, he says, you know what, I'm not going to make wudu now. He's not talking, but this is his intentions, and he'll go somewhere else. And once he start going somewhere else, he comes back immediately, and he says, no, let me make wudu. According to this, he has to return or begin the wudu again from the beginning. Why? Because he stopped that condition, for a second or a split of a second. If it's a pillar, it's sufficient just to have the intention in the beginning and that's it. Right? And you don't have to carry it with you to the end. So that's why a niyyah shart. It's not something for us to keep on thinking about the niyyah, the entire wudu. It's just it becomes in place if something like that happens. If you decided that you're breaking the wudu, you're going somewhere else. So وَالنِّيَّةُ شَرْطٌ لِكُلِّ, this is for every religious tahara, you have to have intentions, and that the intention would separate between al-'ada, or what a person would do as a habit, versus something religious. Except 3 exceptions here that you don't have to have a niyyah as a condition if you're purifying yourself. 1, إزالة خبث. Izalat, we talked about that before, removing khabath. Khabath is impurities. So if you're cleaning yourself from an impurity that you cannot pray when it's on your body or your clothing or the spot that you're praying on, you don't have to have the intention in your heart that you're doing that to make salah. You know, if you just removed it without any intentions, well, there's no impurities, so that means you can make salah and there's no harm. You don't have to have intentions to remove it, and there's implications to this. And the second one, وَغُسْلِ كِتَابِيَّةٍ لِحِلِّ وَطْءٍ. Ghusl is washing, but here refers to the shower. The entire body is washed. Kitabiyya, with a ta' marbuta at the end, that means this is a woman, a female, kitabiyya, from the people of the book. So the shower of a woman from the book, from the people of the book, lihilli, from the halal, for the hil, for the permissibility of what, and what is the relations. A man married a Jew or a Christian. She's not a Muslim. So, but she has to take a shower after menses, even though she's not a Muslim. He cannot have relations with her unless she has to take a shower. Even though this is not in her religion or she's not a believer, she still have to take a shower. So does she have to have intentions? She's not a Muslim, so how can she have intentions to start with? So she has to be in the state of Taharah. That means she has to take a shower for that. وَمُسْلِمَةٍ مُمْتَنِعَةٍ لِذَلِكَ. And also if a Muslimah is refusing, right? For her husband to have relations with her, she has to have a shower. So even though she did not have the intentions because she's refusing, right, she still have to take a shower, right? So ممتنعة لذلك, for that matter. So what the intention here is mandatory for her, but not mandatory for him with regards to her, for them to have relations. Right? So for the man, from the man perspective, if his wife did not have intentions for ghusl, it's halal for him. But she should have intentions, you know, so this is, they separate between the two individuals in this case. I hope it's clear. So this is the exceptions where the niyyah is not shart or a condition, removing the impurities, the shower or the ghusl of a woman from Ahl Kitab for her husband, and a Muslimah that she refuses to be with her husband, if, you know, then the shower for her becomes without intentions because he doesn't want to have the intentions, but if she does it, that means it's permissible for him. And then he says, وَالتَّسْمِيَةُ وَاجِبَةٌ فِي. Now he talks about the tasmiyah. At-tasmiyah is to say Bismillah. At-tasmiyah is to say Bismillah. And at-tasmiyah wajibah. Wajibah here is different than fard. So the furud, we talked about the 6 furud. But here, according to the madhab, is that the tasmiyah is wajibah. Wajibah means it's an obligation. That means that a person has to do it, has to say Bismillah. And if he doesn't say Bismillah, the farq between, the difference between the wajib and the fard, in the context of fiqh like this, is that the fard, you have to do it even if you forgot. Even if you did not know, you still have to do it. And once you know, you have to repeat the wudu again and so on. The wajib, which is a lesser degree of an obligation, if a person misses it intentionally, knowingly, not forgetfully, and he misses it, according to this, his wudu is not valid. But if he forgets it, he forgot to say Bismillah, right? And he remembered after he finished the wudu, or in the middle of the wudu, he can say it then, or if he finished the wudu, he doesn't have to say it, of course, and he does not have to repeat the wudu again, because it's wajib, not fard. And the evidence of that is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, لا وضوء لمن لم يذكر اسم الله عليه. There is no wudu except for the one that no wudu for the one that does not mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on it. So if this hadith is sound, as Imam Ahmad rahimahullah said, that means it's the Prophet ﷺ say no wudu. So that's why, according to the opinion of the madhab here, that it's wajib. So what should we do? We should say Bismillah. But if you forgot, there's no harm on you, right? And what to say Bismillah in the bathroom, outside the bathroom, all of these things, it should be right before the wudu. So it's, if you're walking into the bathroom and you're saying Bismillah and you're there, you make wudu, mashallah. If you forget, say it in there, because it's wajib, because you have to say Bismillah before you make wudu. And that's because it's here the issue of the wujub. The jumhur, the majority of the ulama, on opinion that it's not wajib. So what tasmiyatu wajibatun fi, in what? In wudu, it's wajib, it's obligation, but of a lesser degree, as we hear the difference. In wudu, any wudu. And the same thing with the pillars here, right? It's in any wudu, whether you're going to pray for fard or whether you're going to pray nafl. To be in wudu, you have to make these pillars. And the same thing with the tasmiyah. It's wajib in wudu, وغسل. الغسل is, the word shower is not accurate, of course. غسل is washing. Wudu is very specific, specific actions. And you see how the very accurate words. Nobody can, you can never think of someone makes wudu by mistake. No one is going to do like the actions of wudu. He says, I was just trying to make myself cool off. It doesn't work that way. He has to have intentions that he's making wudu. But ghusl, washing, a person can wash himself without having an intention. So that's why the ghusl is important when it comes to the intention there. And if someone else make to someone else wudu without the intention, the one that is the wudu is been made to, he has to have intentions. If someone is not able to make wudu for himself and someone else does it for him, that person should have intentions that the wudu is being made for him. So ghusl is washing the entire body with the madmada and istinshaq as it will come. So if a person dips himself into the swimming pool or the sea and then he comes out, but with the condition that he had water inside of his mouth and the nose, that means his ghusl is there with the intention that he's making ghusl. So the tasmiyah also to say Bismillah before that happens. وَتَيَمُّمٍ, and it's also wajib before making tayammum, as the tayammum will come, as they translated the dry ablution also, but we keep it as tayammum. And also wajiba fi وَغَسْلِ يَدَيْ قَائِمٍ مِّن نَوْمِ لَيْلٍ نَاقِدٍ لِوُضُوء. What is this mas'ala here? Someone washing وَغَسْلِ يَدَيْ قَائِمٍ, washing the two hands, yaday, the two hands of qa'imin min nawm. Qa'im, get up, stand up. But here min nawm, that means someone got up from nawm, from sleep, nawmi laylin, from sleeping at night, not sleeping during the day. The sleep that is during the night. Someone got up from his sleep during the night and he washes his hand. That is, this sleep is naqidin li wudu. The sleep broke his wudu, because if a person sleeps, that sleep breaks the wudu, except a special type of a person sitting and he just dozing like this. But if he slept during the night and that sleep breaks his wudu, of course, so he gets up at night and he needs to make wudu as it will come. The person has to wash his hands outside of a container if he's making the wudu from the container 3 times. So here in this case, he says wajiba, the tasmiyah here, when that person is, when he's going to wash his hands 3 times, is to say Bismillah, right? So he says Bismillah here before he puts his hands in the container by washing it 3 times outside of the container. This is the meaning of وَغَسْلِ يَدَيْ, 2 hands, قَائِمٍ مِّن نَوْم, someone get up from sleep, نَوْمِ لَيْلٍ, مُضَافًا مُضَافِ إِلَيْهِ, نَوْمِ لَيْل, the sleep during the night, نَاقِدٍ لِوُضُوء, that this sleep breaks the wudu. And why do they say that with this specific action? This will come, inshallah ta'ala, because again, it's not when you're making wudu from the normal tap water. When you make wudu, you woke up in the middle of the night and you want to make wudu, you just make wudu. You start with washing the hand 3 times, which is from the sunnah, the recommended acts of wudu. But if you're making wudu from a container, so the Prophet ﷺ forbade the person when he wakes up from sleep during the night that he would dip his hand in the container. First, he has to wash his hand outside of the container 3 times before he puts it in the container. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَدْرِي أَيْنَ بَاتَتْ يَدُهُ, because he doesn't know where his hands has been during the night. And as ulama, they said, this is amr ta'abbudi. This is Allah knows best why we do this. So if you have a camera right on you, spotted on you the entire night, and you know where your hands is, you put gloves in, and you know exactly that your hands didn't do anything, impurity or anything like this, still you have to do that if you're going to dip your hand in a container, right? So that's why, because there might something that is unseen to us. So to follow that command from the Prophet ﷺ, so since this is not something of a livelihood matter, so that means the intention has to be there, and that's why the tasmiyah needs to be there, or to say Bismillah according to what is mentioned here. And the intention, of course, is something else. Then he says, وَتَسْقُطُ سَهْوًا وَجَهْلًا. The tasmiyah, if you go back, it's wajiba in what? Wudu, ghusl, tayammum, and washing the hands outside the container when you wake up during the night. And the tasmiyah here, another mas'ala, وَتَسْقُطُ سَهْوًا وَجَهْلًا. Tasqut, as-suqut is when something falls. And this is if it's something physically false. If we're talking here about the tasmiyah, tasqut, that means that it's not there anymore. It's not obligatory anymore. So it's wajib. يسقط الوجوب. That means the wujub fell down. No, it means the wujub or the obligation is not there anymore. It's not an obligation. وتسقط, this refers to the tasmiyah. Sahwan wa jahlan. Sahwu means forgetfully, if a person forgot it, because it's wajib and it's not fard. Wa jahlan, and jahlan, if a person is jahil, he doesn't know the ruling of the tasmiyah that it's wajib, unlike the fard. If a person forgot something, he still have to make the wudu again, because the wudu is invalid. If he does something wrong with the fard unknowingly, if he knows, he has to repeat the wudu again and the salah. But the wajib, and the same thing with the arkan and the wajibat of the salah, as it will come inshallah ta'ala. Then he says, this is the furud of the wudu and the tasmiyah as wajib, right? And then he says, وَمِن sunanihi, from the sunan of the wudu. وَمِن sunanihi, from, that means not necessarily all the sunan, but from the sunan. And the sunan again in fiqh refers to what's recommended. If a person doesn't do it, there is no sin, or the wudu is valid, but it's definitely recommended, and a person should do it to the best of his ability. وَمِن sunanihi, from the sunan of the wudu, istiqbalu qibla. Istiqbal is to face qibla. Al-qibla is, as we know, is to face Mecca if you're not in Mecca. This is something recommended. Is there a specific evidence with that? There might not be specific evidence in that, but it's the general thing that the ulama talk about istiqbal al-qibla, is that in every good deed, if you can face the qibla, this is always part of the sharia. So in general, like from the general rulings of the sharia, some of the rulings, that's one of the things is when we look in the books of fiqh and we say, what's the dalil for this? What's the evidence for this? Sometimes the evidence is a general evidence that is not related to that particular thing, but it's always good. If you're doing anything of goodness, it's even if you're not doing anything, if you have the choice to face the qibla or not to face the qibla, face the qibla. Right? It's a good thing always to face the qibla. But do you make it difficult for yourself? And you have to make sure everything, no, you just make it easy for yourself. But if you're doing a good deed, reading Quran, making dua, things like this, it's not mandatory. And the same thing with the wudu. Istiqbalu qibla. But if you're sink and you're standing making wudu and it's not facing the qibla, don't break the sink and do it in a separate way and things like this. So istiqbalu qibla wa siwak. So the siwak before the wudu, this is from the sunan, from what is recommended, and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is very clear of this. And with the siwak, if you have, to make it easy, you should have more than one. And one, like when people put their toothbrush in the bathroom, so you have a siwak in the bathroom, siwak for you to go out, right? And if you have the luxury of it, you have another one, because you're going to change it anytime on a daily basis, so it's not going to be waste. So if a person has this, but if there's scarcity of it, then it's okay, then inshallah ta'ala. Wasiwak, and if a person wants to clean his mouth with the toothbrush and so on, that's fine, but to make it easy for oneself. Wasiwak is one of the sunan. Wabada'atun, the fourth one of the sunan. وبداءة بغسل يدي غير قائم من نوم ليل ويجب له ثلاثا تعبدا. To start with washing. Bada'a is to start with, and this is as a noun. Bada'atun بغسل, to wash, يدي, two hands, غير قائم من نوم ليل. غير قائم. First one who said قائم. غير قائم, that means not, this is negating. Someone that is not getting up from a night's sleep. Right? So from the sunan is basically to wash your hands 3 times. But why he mentioned here غير قائم من نوم ليل? Because if a person wakes up from the night sleep and is making wudu from a container, there is 3 times washing. There is nothing to do with wudu yet. You're washing outside the container 3 times. And then after you do that, then you wash your hands 3 times by dipping your hand in the water. This is now you're starting the wudu. So this is different than the first one. So, and if it's not from a container, then you start with washing the hands 3 times. And that's why he says, بِغَسْلِ يَدَيْ غَيْرِ قَائِمٍ, not someone that is getting up, مِن نَوْمِ لَيْلٍ. So if it's during the day, it doesn't count the sleep during the day. Then if you're making wudu from a container, you can put your hands in the container, no problem, if it's sleeping during the day. ويجب له ثلاثا تعبدا, which means that it becomes ويجب له, يجب له, it's mandatory for him 3 times تعبدا as an act of ibadah. Who's that يجب له? يجب to who? Yes, the one that woke up from the night. So al-wujub here, what is mandatory here is if a person wakes up during the night to make wudu from a container, he has to wash his hand. He has to wash his hands outside the container 3 times. But to wash the hands 3 times before wudu, this is sunnah. You see the difference? So that's what this sentence refers to. وَيَجِبُ لَهُ, it's mandatory for him, the meaning the one that wakes up at the middle of the night to make wudu from a container. He has to do it 3 times. ta'abbudan. Ta'abbudan, that means we don't know the wisdom behind it. It's ibadah. So we don't know the reason for it or the wisdom behind it. So don't say I know or I don't know. So you just have to do it. ta'abbudan. Also from the sunnah of the wudu, وَبِمَضْمَضَةٍ فَاسْتِنْشَاقٍ. We talked about the madmada and the istinshaq as a pillar, the nose and the mouth. Here what is sunnah is وَبِمَضْمَضَةٍ فَاسْتِنْشَاقٍ. Madmada first and then istinshaq second. So if the fard part, if a person made the nose first and then the mouth second, his wudu is valid. The tartib between the mouth and the nose is not fard because it's all part of the same organ, which is the face. But from the sunnah, what is recommended is that you make the mouth first and then the nose, and even more with 1 handful, as the hadith in Sahih Bukhari, not 2 times. Just 1 handful with the mouth and then the rest in the nose, and then with the left hand you get the water out from the nose. وَبِمَضْمَضَةٍ فَا. This is what we understood from the fa here. Then فَاسْتِنْشَقٍ. Another one of the sunnah, وَمُبَالَغَةٌ فِيهِمَا لِغَيْرِ صَائِمٍ. And مُبَالَغَةٌ. Al-mubalagha is the from even al-ghulu, like extensiveness or extreme. That means you make more of fihima in the madmada wal istinshaq. You make it with intense way that but for لغير صائم. لغير negating صائم. If you're not fasting, that means for the fasting person, you still have to make madmada and istinshaq, but not in a strong way. So you can put just small amount of water, but you still, when you move the water in the mouth and then you spit it out. But if for the sa'im, for the fasting person, if you put water in the mouth and you spit it out, right, you made madmad, right? But if you're not fasting, then you can put more water and you can move it strongly in the mouth, because if something goes in, there's no harm. But for the fasting person, because the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, make more excessiveness of it unless you are fasting. You know, some people they wipe their lips when they're fasting with the water so that they don't put water inside. According to this, the wudu is not valid. You have to have water inside. And if something falls in the mouth, in the throat by mistake, there's no harm. But when is it harmful? If you make mubalagha. If you're fasting and you put a whole bunch of water in the mouth and you're just going back and forth in the water, and then something falls by mistake, so they said you broke your fast. Why? You didn't intentionally do that, because you disobeyed the command of the Prophet ﷺ when he said, do not make mubalagha. So if you did not make mubalagha and something fall by mistake, there's no harm on you. وَمُبَالَغَةٌ فِيهِمَا لِغَيْرِ صَائِمٍ وَتَخْلِيلُ شَعْرٍ كَثِيفٍ وَالْأَصَابِعِ. Another sunnah, takhleel. Al-takhleel, like also al-khalil, is the closest, the highest level of love or so, because he is like as if he is very close to the one that he loves. So al-takhleel here is that you, for the sha'r, for the hair, there is kathif. Kathif is thick. So the hair here is for the beard, for example. The head, you don't make takhleel to the head. Takhleel is what you put your fingers inside. Like you make your fingers inside of your beard. There's no takhleel for the head, because the head is to be wiped. Even if you have a long hair, it's not from the sunnah that you go with your fingers. This is if you're taking a shower, you go with your finger. But if you're making wudu, you just wipe over the head, over the hair. But this is the takhleel al-sha'r. This is for the beard. وَتَخْلِيلُ شَعْرٍ كَثِيفٍ. Kathif is thick. Kathif is thick. And what constitutes kathif? If the skin is not shown. If the skin is shown, that means it's not kathif, it's khafif or light or so. So what is light is to be washed. What's kathif, you don't have to wash, meaning the skin. If the skin is shown, if someone have a very light beard, he's not going to do, well, he cannot make takhleel to it. So it's only if you can put your fingers inside of your beard, that means you wash, the water runs on your face, and you make takhleel. What if you don't make takhleel? Your wudu is valid. So even if you just, the water falls onto your beard like this, but the sunnah is to make takhleel, is to go with your fingers inside. And also al-asabi', and the fingers, whether it's the hands or the foot, is to make takhleel. That means you put your finger interlock like this with the other one to make sure that it's al-marajim or this inside is washed. The same thing with the foot, with the toes, because it's sunnah, it's recommended, because if someone just put his foot under the water, right, and the water is going inside between the toes, the wudu is valid. You don't have to go in between, but to go in between with your finger or with your pinky or whatever, this is recommended. This is sunnah to do so, and a person should do it, of course. And it's anytime there is something like that recommended, it always brings the meaning of if people discover that this is such a healthy, great benefit, would we do it? People would start to do things, right? But our intention, so that we don't lose the reward, we should do it, and we don't wait for someone to discover something for us. And even if a person get to know that, but he should correct his intentions, inshallah ta'ala. والأصابع وثانية وثالثة وكره أكثر. وثانية, and ثانية is second, وثالثة and third. That means in wudu it's sunnah to wash second time, to wash the third time. And وكره أكثر, and it is disliked to make more. There's a hadith forbidding making more than 3 times. And if a person is not sure if he did 2 or 3, okay, 2 is sufficient. So don't add 1. It's not sahwu like in salah, right? But do not do more than 3. Do not wash more than 3. Al-masih, anything that is wiped as a rule, is only 1 time. You don't make masih more than 1 time. You don't make masih of the head 2 or 3 times. Only 1 time. More than that, this is excessiveness. This is dislike. And the same thing with washing what needs to be washed. وثانية وثالثة وكره, and it is disliked أكثر, more than that. وسنة بعد فراغه. This is again from the sunnah of the wudu. وسنة بعد فراغه. وسنة, that means it's recommended after بعد, after فراغه, after he finishes. The ha here refers to the one making wudu. After فراغه. Al-faragh is the emptiness. نعمتان مغبون فيهما كثير من الناس الصحة والفراغ. 2 ni'mah, 2 favors of Allah that many people that are basically, al-ghabn is when a person is cheated upon something, when a person is not taking advantage of it. Al-sihha, health, and al-faragh, to have emptiness or free time or so. So وَسُنَّ بَعْدَ فَرَاغِهِ, it's recommended after finishing the wudu, رَفْعُ بَصَرِهِ إِلَى السَّمَاء. رفع, elevate. We talked about رفع الحدث, right? Elevate oneself from the state of being not in wudu. This is a non-physical رفع, to elevate something. But here physical, رفع بصره. Not the head, but his head is basically his eyes. To look, رفع بصره, his eyes, إلى السماء, to السماء. السماء is the skies. But if you're on the ceiling, you don't have to go outside to look at the skies. It's just basically to look up, right? And there's a hadith here, but it's daif. It's a weak hadith. So this is what is mentioned. وَقَوْلُ مَا وَرَدْ. وَقَوْلُ مَا وَرَدْ. Also, after you finish the wudu, قَوْل, to say مَا وَرَدْ, what came to us, what we received, meaning from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Like أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم اجعلني من التوابين واجعلني من المتطهرين. And there's also سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. So to say that after you finish the wudu and the virtue of that. And he says والله أعلم, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So there is here sunan while making wudu, and there is sunan after finishing the wudu. Or should we stop here? Okay, let's take a break, but not just 5 minutes, inshallah. And we'll take a break before the salah, like 6:45. So we'll come back, inshallah, at 5:55, if you don't mind. And then we'll continue to 6:45, and then we stop, inshallah. Then after Isha we continue. So we'll start by مسح الخفين, wiping over the خفين.